All right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning,
Get this Finance Committee
Chair Moat.
started. I got no choice. Charlie, good morning.
Good morning. It's been a long time, so long.
Yeah, 12 hours.
12 hours, from one
Before we-
PowerPoint presentation to another.
Before we get going in too much depth, Mr. Carter, longtime police chief, had a question about the health insurance financially.
You want to step?
I noticed in the council agenda,
You want to step
Oh,
up
you gotta
here?
come.
Oh, yeah.
I noticed in the council agenda, there was a discussion about health employee options. And I was concerned about it because if you leave Maine municipal, I'm out the window. And that's my concern. And trying to figure out if that's what you was talking about or what.
No, I don't think it's no, we're basically kind of re-implementing a previous plan, the POSC plan, but I think it's still through Maine Municipal.
I don't think it will affect you. It should not affect you at all. I understand what you're saying. so-
Yeah.
And I'll double confirm with our HR director and, for Monday, but I'm like 99.99% sure that won't affect you at all. It's just for new employees as an additional option, or current employees as an additional option, but it won't affect
Great.
anybody else's. But I
It's
also
very
wrote that-
satisfying to hear because I've always worried about that.
Right, right.
No, and like I said, sir, I'll also double check with our HR director to confirm that and maybe update it on
Well,
Monday.
I'll watch the meeting Monday night anyway, so.
And we have
I'll
other-
hear your discussion, but that's been on my mind since I read that in Wednesday's paper.
And to
So I'm going
further,
to finance meeting this morning and find out about it, so.
to further your comment, the clerk is printing you some information about that subject that
Okay.
she said she'd bring in.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you, sorry.
No, I think
take
that's
over.
perfect, yeah.
And just,
No, go ahead.
I had just a general note on that as well for the packets that went out last night. Carrie's memos, I think, do a pretty good job of explaining what the changes are and the overview, but then there's also links like in the agendas as well that sends you outside to like the full personnel memo with like the actual changes that would be made in red. We didn't want to
I
include it.
couldn't open it.
You couldn't open it, okay.
I emailed Ebony and she sent them to me. The links didn't open, so she sent the documents. I assume she'll follow up with
Interesting,
everybody.
they were fine for me last night. And we actually double checked with Tina to have something come through, so. But we'll want to get you there. I just didn't want to have like the packets be, you have to read through that much before you get through them, so. But that's on my SMART goals, which we'll talk about that evening in personnel as well, is trying to get a little bit better on how we organize these memos and the packets, and maybe there's kind of a tech element for you all too. I've been thinking of actually just doing a binder system, just, that has the binders for these packets and these memos, or so that it's, and we have those available ahead of time. But that's one of the ideas I have. I have others, but we can talk further about that later. Sometimes tech is very helpful, and sometimes being able to go through something that's organized and tabbed and you can find it and then see it and make your own notes is also very helpful too. So on that note, so we've had a few conversations already. This is probably our third or fourth at Finance Committee meeting about infrastructure and local roads. I think the end goal, as I've said before, is to get to a full capital improvement plan, 1, 5, 10 years, very similarly structured to the budget book. But there's a ton of work that needs to be done there. And as we talked about in budget season last year, especially the roads piece, that we wanted to go into a bonding cycle because we have a lot of deferred maintenance on our roads. And we didn't want to put that on kind of 1 year of the tax rolls. I think, as Steve, you've mentioned a few times, these have a longer lifespan, and we shouldn't, that would be an incredible hit to the mill rate for a year one, and something that's going to be a very long-term benefit to the community and has been deferred for a while. So,
And it's not working the way it is.
yep.
We're kicking the road, we're kicking the can down the road because the citizenry can't pay for that much in one session. And if you've got a 7-year road and you finance it for 5 years or what have you, I think it's a smaller bite of the apple makes it a little more tasty.
Yeah. And, I won't go through Yeah, would you- I was about to say our Apple expert. So I won't, I have a little cover memo on here to kind of go over, but I won't belabor that. You all sort of know this pretty
Big
intuitively.
city, too many roads.
Biggest city, too
Not
many
enough
roads.
money.
Not enough money, yeah.
Not enough money.
That was not lawyer talk at all.
No, I've
That was clarity.
We've had some, the initial lifts from some of the roads committee work was done in the spring, and that this is really a continuation of that work. I know there was a meeting earlier this week as well with the roads committee to confirm that these are indeed the most high-need roads, both for high traffic and disrepair, but there's also some environmentally significant ones on the Branch Lake, which is kind of our water supply that we've worked with the Branch Lake Association to really identifying as needing a little work as well. So kind of the next steps too is, I think one of the things we've also been doing a lot of due diligence on is not just prepping the band, which Nate and the team have been doing, but really, if the council were to approve this on Monday, that we're in a pencils up mode. Like, we have to do a lot of work this winter to get bids, to put them together, to have these roads, once the money's approved, repaired or replaced as soon as possible. We can't do that in the spring. We'll talk further once the bids are in on whether that's late April, weather dependent, whether it's May. I think there's a lot of work to be done there, but we want to make sure that we have all the organizational work ready in place so that once you pass the bond, that this isn't going to be a long-term process, or that we'll have some pretty defined ideas of when this will happen, and we'll put together Gantt charts and project plannings. There's also the Surrey Road, I think redo next year. The High Street redo next year is happening as well, so we'll also try and layer in just so folks have a bigger picture view of all the road work, what's being done by the city, but it's also what's being done by the state. We talked a bit last night on other road pieces associated with the courthouse, and we are up for a municipal partnership initiative, which is like kind of a partnership with the state of Maine due to our kind of how our local roads funding works, that we could pick out another project as well. That's another piece that later in this winter we probably need to start working on. What do we want our next MPI to be with the state of Maine? And we're also going to be continuing to produce or look at not just for road type infrastructure, but all of our infrastructure, federal, state grants to help mitigate not just the effect on the taxpayer here alone. I'll send it over to Nate for maybe a little bond. You want me to just go over it, Nate? or-
I'll say you can just go over it. I mean, I can chime in whenever.
Sure, and we talked about this in the budget cycle a little bit, just on the total technical side of bond capacity and limitations. The full valuation for the city currently is about 1.5 billion, based on the allowable debt limit in the state of Maine is up to 231 million. Obviously, almost no state or city I can imagine could be there without being very difficult. We're not planning on going anywhere near that, but that is the total allowable. Our current outstanding are 25 million outstanding bonds with about a $2 million annual debt service. We have a debt schedule. Is that in here?
It's not in this one, no, but we'll have it in the packet on Monday.
Okay, we'll send it in the to you in the packet, or but I should also note that it's 2 million, but $1 million of that is in the enterprise accounts, like
Enterprise,
water, wastewater. So it's only about $1 million, meaning the what's covered on the debt service for the year-to-year budget cycle. The other piece is on the ratepayers for water and wastewater, so it's about half and half. Which, after a lot of analysis, which we talked about, is comparatively low to service centers of our size here in Maine. And I think there's some conversation of like, what's the right mix? What do you, should you have this? Well, we're lower than these others. Should we have more? Well, I think it kind of depends on the state of your infrastructures. A lot of bigger cities are on a total bond cycle with their road repairs. They're not funding with their year-to-year tax rates at all. Some cities have a different strategy where they're forward funding every single year with With tax dollars, it's been a strategy for a long time. Some it's a mix, and it also depends not just on, like, hey, should we have this much debt, but how much is your mill rate? And how much debt do you have? How much are you paying on it right now? So I think it's a little more of a, when I think of it is, how much, what's the tax rate and what the additional service is going to be, and then looking at the full debt schedule. Next year, we're pretty much on par, and this is in there with what our current debt service amount is in the budget. I think it's like 1.1 million per year on the budget side of things, so which affects the mill rate. So that's 2026's debt service schedule will be about the same, about 1.1 million. The next year it drops by about 300,000. So depending on where we're at here, I kind of think directionally, and we have about 320,000 in the local roads budget now. But if we're bonding for a lot of these roads, I could consider that, depending on the reconcile and we're moving forward, that kind of encumbering that over as a debt service to FY '27, right, or 26, to keep the mill on a debt service of a bond of this size fairly stable. And then the next year we'd have a drop off, and that's basically this one. And going forward with growth, and we can see how much more bonding we want to do. But that's kind of where I've been looking at this. But we're gonna have a separate infrastructure plan and probably have to make some tough decisions on if we want to go above that and add more debt service for the years, because there's a lot more than just the roads of deferred maintenance around here.
So I see the annual debt service payments of almost 2.1 million. Is that just city debt, or is that water, wastewater as well?
That's included in that water
Okay, so
wastewater.
that's gonna make a big difference there because it's not affecting the tax rate.
Yeah, it's 1.1 is the city debt side.
Okay.
Or is the the mill rate is included in. So you're at 1.1 million this year, roughly 1.1 million next year for FY '26, and then FY '27 it drops to like 800,000. So if and because the local roads funding is there, but if we bond for this, we'd be able to pull from the bond for these road repairs in this year. I would hope to potentially just kind of hold that there and encumber that over to cover that next year is going to be the one we wouldn't want to increase on. The next year it kind of evens out, but I can talk further about that.
I mean, none of that 300 and some thousand gets spent in this year's cycle.
Not if we do this bond.
Would that hinder road projects this year that otherwise need to get done?
This is the full list within the ban. So yeah, this is kind of the benefit of going towards this method, but it's for consideration. So.
And there always ends up, I'd almost prefer to kind of keep it in there in case there's any emergencies and unexpected costs that we come across, rather than encumbering it, and just keep it. I know it's for the bond, but I personally would rather just see it go for other road items, so.
Okay.
Could I get a little history lesson? When I was elected 3 years ago, it seemed that there was no money being spent on the roads, and from the chatter that I have heard, it just seemed to be the area that would get put off and put off and put off. And you mentioned earlier in this conversation that some towns pre-fund roads and they don't bond anything. At one time, was Ellsworth doing that? And then, and Tammy, you could speak to this better, and then as things got tighter, that was an area that got cut back, is that fair?
Yeah, that's true. Mhm.
So, at one point, it was being pre-funded, if you will, and that hasn't, we've fallen out of that cycle, so the roads have suffered. And was it that way forever? Or was it something that it didn't cost as much, so it was easier to pre-fund?
Michelle, do you want to chime in?
Oh, yeah. I didn't catch the last piece after Stephen asked about if this is how we.
Yeah, well,
I'm sorry.
No, no problem. My question is this, when I arrived 3 years ago, it doesn't seem like we've spent much on roads, and it seems like that's an area that has continued to suffer and continue to go backwards and erode, and here we are with a big list of needs. And at one point, was there a good size amount every year that you could pay for with simply the tax billing?
I wouldn't say it was a good size. We ended up, I think the reason we started the whole borrowing for the roads piece was because it was just getting so expensive, and as we were trying to control budgets, like Tammy just said, we used to cut, because that was the place, you put $300,000, and back then, $300,000 went a lot further than it does now. But you put $300,000 in there for paving, and then we borrow for complete reconstruction. But then, people would complain about the mill rate, so as the budget got closer to being approved, and then local roads would be cut every time.
Gotcha.
Because it was the only place, that, you could cut.
Gotcha.
That you'd really
It's
affect
been
the mill
it's been
rate.
an ongoing problem for a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah,
Okay,
the-
so I just, when Charlie mentioned, Michelle, that some towns, I'm using the word pre-fund or not bond, if you will, but, I'm a true believer that we've fallen out of the practice of maintaining the roads, and spreading this over time is the only way we're gonna make this happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Steve. And once if we can get caught up, you can budget for the lighter maintenance that you do, and then borrow again, for the larger project. But yeah, it's just expensive. What is it, Tammy, now, about 1.2 million a mile?
Yes. If not 1.5, I think Christian Ridge is 1.5, but they had some more extensive work.
Yeah, and there's,
Yeah.
there is some more long-term planning with the Village Partnership Initiative, the Thriving Communities that, might be able to be layered in here. I think that's kind of this is sort of the immediate need. But there's a lot more work to do on roads to get sort of a full inventory. And I've talked to Sue Lassard over in Bucksport, who's done this with a bunch of cities and towns. They have, I think, a 4-mile, target every year. Do we want to go to not just this, which is the most need, go to sort of a target like that once we have the full inventory? There's a lot of software packages. I have actually a few people in the deputy city manager running. I've mentioned some of these that have some experience in work like this, and we're using softwares and road identifications to be a little bit more formulaic. And I think in some ways it is a mathematical exercise on what's the total liability. How do you schedule it in? I know Michelle and I talked about the importance of hey, let's do $14 million, and then you're going to be just, 4 city managers from now, all of a sudden all the roads fall apart at the same time.
Right.
You don't want to do that either. So, a staggered plan, a really comprehensive plan for how we're going to go about this that layers in the state and federal funding. That is, all right, this is probably what we're going to do for bonding that the city can hold for X amount of years. And then to your point, Tammy, how do we move forward? And I think that other piece on, what do we do with this local roads piece too is it a separate for the more emergencies? And we talked about that with reserve funding last time around. Highway had, wastewater has the biggest reserve account, but highway probably should from a year-to-year maintenance have the larger, so how much is that? How much do we want to keep in that highway piece that could be pulled from in reserve accounting, which should also be part of that conversation? I know, I think in some ways, Tammy, Michelle, that was their piece. I talked about it with Tammy in this cycle, which as we're going through things, I'm trying to slash budgets where I can, playing around the edges with training budgets and office supplies, and but we got big collective bargaining increases, and you get to the kind of end of the line, and if you're going to hold the mill rate from not a huge increase, like roads is going to be, your really only really big ticket way to do it, and that's unfortunate, and has probably been for a long time. And there's a separate piece where they did, previous councils over probably the last 5 years, approved funding for roads that, through budget freezes, it's not that it was misappropriated, but you know, it didn't end up getting spent on the roads that it was supposed to be spent on. You know, that there were other, you know, there was such poor accounting practices for what actual expenses were across the board with things. We talked about this in the budget cycle, you know, they weren't paying or federal payroll taxes on overtime. So for many years, you know, West Orange say we were paying that, but that wasn't getting budgeted for. So, you know, and you all were here for some of those difficult budgeting
Fond
times.
memories of March
What-
last year, this year.
My question about this piece of business is, what assurances in this bond anticipation note is going to state that we're not going to over-finance? In other words, you have a 7-year life on a road, and we're financing it for 15 years when you actually go out to bond.
We could talk to Safin about that. I think it's,
That's my concern, is this note is one thing, but I don't want to take this note and then get to the bond and overfinance.
So we did talk about that at the local roads committee meeting. I asked them to make sure that, you know, if we're paying for maintenance paving and it's just a shim, the life expectancy is 5 years. So we wouldn't, you can structure your financing
can't-
individually
Okay, all right.
by like, okay, these roads are gonna be for 10 years, these are gonna be for 5 years, and you can structure it. So, you know,
I
some
know you
years will have
can do
big
that,
drops.
I didn't know how to do it, because I know it's been done in the past.
Yeah.
but it's something
Well, it's
about-
just my concern that I want to be, I'm all for financing the roads to get them done, but I don't want to.
Bond's only for 20 years, it's only
Absolutely.
gonna last 10.
I don't want to overstate that. I don't want to have a negative equity situation.
Nope, absolutely not.
and maybe, well, you know, I think the spring bond issuance with the main bond bank is our most likely. To your point, Steve, before, I wouldn't be opposed to kicking the tires on sending it out as well, to see if there's some private options too. We should always look for multiple options for best rates and not just assume the bond bank. But, you know, also my guarantee that that we'll have that discussion there as we go to bond this, as, you know, not just for those roads, but some of the other pieces, the plow truck that's in here, and the you know, the survey work, this, like, what is the average cycle here, and what do we want to do? Do we want to parse it out into mini bonds, but then also it's in there and gets done too. So, we'll, I hope probably the conversation is probably February on that, to line things up for, here's what we're going to send to the main bond bank with the terms and what the prices will be, and then what we can consider for changing our debt service schedule for the next, I don't know, 20 years or so.
I would just echo, I think, what Steve was saying. My concern is that the length of the debt matches the length of useful service. Once we get caught up in that, I'm glad to see that we're on track with that. One, I guess, a question, going back to the analysis of bond capacity, where we've got existing bond obligation, and it just shows the 2 million, and then we know as a sidebar, it's $1 million for the city and then $1 million for the water and wastewater, which is different. I think it would be valuable to have that in this document to show that differentiation.
You're gonna have a more detailed
Okay.
band book on Monday night, and that information should be on there.
Great.
I'll double check, but,
Yeah, that's an important
Yeah.
differentiation. I was paid for by the fees.
no,
this is
very,
paid for.
very much is, and like I said, I'll double check, the debt schedule, I believe, shows the differentiation between
Great.
the enterprise and the non-enterprise
Cool.
companies.
Yeah, we have the, I looked at it last night at like 11 o'clock, so I know it's there. I was gonna pull it up on the board, but
Yeah,
it's,
no, I looked
it's a
at
big
it.
spreadsheet,
No, I-
year,
Yeah.
and then it, just on the city side, so you can see that,
Great.
okay, it's $1.1 million, now
Yeah.
it drops to 800,000, and here's where it goes. I think there's like 2 or 3 more years where it's, I'm sorry, just streaming of consciousness here, but it's 2 or 3 more
No, you're
years
right,
of around 800,000, 700,000, and then it drops again to like 400, like there's a
Yeah.
big drop, so it's, we have 1 more year about similar debt schedule, and then a drop of about 300,000, and then 2 or 3 more years of similar, and then another drop of like 300,000, so.
Right.
um,
Great, thank
So
you.
feathering in new debt, potentially, but also, I think next finance season too, I really want to do a lot more on on growth and projected analysis of what tax, or growth will be in Ellsworth if all things are equal, and how much we can expect, because those are all the other kinds of assumptions you need to start bringing in. Projected growth of government through collective bargaining increases and inflation and other things, to have a little bit better longitudinal analysis of where we're going, and not just kind of, hey, we need these roads and this seems all right, but
Right, how it fits in the big picture.
if you, and I've built these models in the past, but if you want to dial up to, $8 million in debt, okay, here's what that's gonna bing, 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 across the board. This is what, your mill rate impacts could be. Those systems aren't too difficult to build, and I'm actually talking to somebody at Northeastern that has data visualization capabilities that could just take data sets like this and do that, but, saying a little too much.
So,
This,
no, you go ahead, that's
Yeah.
what I was gonna talk about, so go
Yeah,
ahead, yeah.
this scares me. I'm looking at the ban life, and you got local roads at 25 years. You've got a plow truck for 10 years. You've got a courthouse access road, which is just the feasibility study for 25 years. That could die tomorrow. That scares me. I don't know about this Surrey Road contingency for 40 years. Are these numbers that just got left in, or, because this is contrary to this discussion?
Yeah, I don't think those numbers are accurate.
I hope not.
I'll be honest with you, I have to give all kudos to Maura, because she put this together yesterday afternoon, but I believe she probably just threw numbers in there and didn't have the actual numbers, because.
I hope so, because that scares the hell out of me.
Yeah, we've had 3 or 4 meetings
Yeah.
on this already. This is kind of the ban life, but was the 2 years. The useful life, I think the roads are 10, and we'll go through the other, but let me talk to Mike and others, and we'll edit this one. That's just a miss. And the courthouse access road is just the feasibility funding, as we talked
That
about
could be
last.
worth zero tomorrow,
Yep.
right? I mean, we don't want to finance that for 25 years.
Yeah, we wouldn't finance a
Surveys.
survey for 25 years.
Yeah.
It would be a small amount, but.
Maybe 25 days.
And I'm not picking this apart, I'm happy to have all of this data, it doesn't line up with our conversation, so.
Yep.
Also, the ban life for 2 years, is there a reason why we're putting that ban out for so long?
It's just the amount of time we have to pull down from it, so we don't, if I can leave it to Nate, but it's not like we do the ban and then all the money comes in and then we start going. We actually put these out to bid, bring them back to council.
What do you recommend, Tammy? I honestly was kind of looking back at previous bans that we've done in the past, so.
So bans are great.
Yeah.
Until you get your permanent financing.
Yeah.
It's just, you're paying interest, you're not paying any principal, so the closer you get to, permanent financing, then you start paying the principal
Yeah.
and start paying it down, and you're gonna pay less in interest, so.
Okay.
That's my only concern, there are reasons why you have to have a long, because I think we can have a ban for up to 3 years according to charter, and so that's just extra interest we're paying.
I gotcha.
Okay, does that make sense? All right.
Yeah.
Can you
So we
ping
can-
staff in on that? Because if it's we really hopefully will be
Does
at the
it,
6 months. This shouldn't be lasted for, so if we can
Does
get
it-
less.
does it really matter? Let's say it's 2 years, and we just, when we
Draw
need
down, yeah.
money from it, we draw from it. And then if we're gonna be bonding each year, the bond takes over.
Takes
that
over the
payment,
band, yeah.
Right? So and we're only drawing what we need from a band, okay, we need 100,000 for this, draw that from the band.
Mhm.
And then the next time we bond, that gets brought. So whether it's 1, 2, or 3 years, I don't see
Yeah.
what's is there a relevance of it? Does it impact the interest rate, or how does that? So if it doesn't impact any of that, then the years, this means, hey, we have 2 years to use this ban, and then each time, once we draw the money down, once we hit the next bond cycle, that covers it, so.
Are we gonna getting a ban through local banks?
Yeah. Well, I'll send the RFPs out, obviously after Monday, to local banks.
So did we put in there that it would be drawn down as needed?
It will be put in there, I guess.
Okay, because sometimes they're like, no, you have to borrow it all at one time in order to get a better interest rate.
Yeah.
So,
According to Safian, yeah, it was gonna be the drawdown as needed.
okay, so
So-
they may bid it both ways.
Okay.
That's- Sometimes they do that, so.
To speak to your point, Patrick, like this plow truck, for example. If you have a 2-year ban and you don't get permanent financing in 2 years and you get a 7-year life on this truck and you take a 7-year loan, now you're financing a 7-year asset for 9 years. You're paying interest only for 2 years. And then, so now you're upside down. I think the ban life is fine as long as you structure the bond
Yeah.
in line with that, because, you know, if you, like right now, the plow truck says 10 years, that's unrealistic, and then if you pay interest on 2, so now you get 12-year financing on a 7-year product at best. I think that could be, but the longer stuff, it probably doesn't make such a difference, is that fair?
Yeah.
Well, so it seems to me that, I think that's a valid point, Steve. As long as when we do go to bond, whatever we've taken, paid through initially with a ban, we take into account what is the life cycle
Yeah.
Yeah.
into making sure we don't, bond it for longer than its expected life. So,
And the reasonability of being able to source those things like the vehicles that could take several years to manufacture and get to us.
Yeah, that's a bit different.
Yep.
So, is there any way that we can get the
full-
handbook, so the
yes.
debt schedules before Monday night's meeting?
I'll have them
Because-
emailed out
today.
today, yeah.
Okay.
I can email it to you to this meeting.
Great, great.
Consider it like Band-Aid.
Oh, geez, I couldn't go Friday
I
without.
figured if
the
Patrick
jerk.
wasn't gonna say it, I'd just do it.
it's a good one. That's all you.
Every Friday, these two. right here.
Reckless abandon.
Okay.
So, great.
Bandana.
Oh, gosh, you're not invited anymore.
Don't worry, we take this seriously.
Yeah.
Do we do? We do. Do we want to talk about any of the homelessness stuff today while we have time?
Yeah, I'll take a minute or two. Oh, I had a thought on this.
Yeah, I do too. I have a
Oh,
question,
sorry.
Just the last.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of, now that we're thinking about 1, 3, 5, 10-year projects, I wonder if there's a consideration for not only cycling or, going a couple miles a year at a time, or a region at a time or whatever, but actual project types to give Public Works, like these next 3 years, you're gonna be putting a lot of work into, say, sidewalks, and then they can get really good at doing them themselves, and maybe that saves money and is more efficient if they have the equipment and learn how to do the sidewalks really well.
Totally. I think this is something I'm excited to partner with Tammy on as we squeeze every bit of institutional knowledge out of her for the last year. But I know you mentioned.
357 days.
Not like you're counting.
I know that you mentioned, Tammy, that like one of the reasons you ran for council was the infrastructure and this kind of piece is to get this back. And we've already had some initial conversations about, I think Tammy, one of the final things you were doing was a big survey and study of the highway department and structuring it and like how we could, and that wasn't really implemented yet. So, and I mentioned I've had some conversations with the Bar Harbor town manager, who's used to be assistant city manager in Brewer, who really did a reimagining that piece to do just what you're talking about, John, is to really start. It's a great crew, and in some ways, because of the condition of road, there's been a lot of like crack sealing of really old roads, and we've kind of done all the crack sealing we can do with these things. So with this bonding for mill and fill, reclaims in some areas, really doing a proper job on these roads, not just crack sealing them, and then reallocating a lot of our timing to, let's start doing sidewalks and get good at the skill set. Maybe we can figure out, I know in Brewer, they said they figured out ways like have the teams pave parking lots and build tracks. I know we have, it's a project near and dear to Michelle's heart. And not just ditching, but, culverts and maybe in some, not just doing a water main when it breaks, we patch it together, but if it's done 2 or 3 times in the same area, like, okay, this is gonna be one of our bigger projects to dig this main out and redo, but, that's gonna be a think for me especially, over the next 2-3 years, and I know the highway department's really excited about this. Getting, it's a big set of roads to take care of, and there's a role for our private contractors in paving and bonding and getting more in line there, but we also have a big team in the highway department that do a great job plowing and maintain things around here, but how can they do some of these bigger value projects too?
Where did these numbers come from?
They came from Lanes as like an addition, a sort of.
Recent?
Yeah, recent.
Just doesn't seem like seems like it should cost more than that, and it's not a complaint.
Well, and
I was like, shh.
It's not a complaint, but I just wanted to make sure we're not dealing with 3-year-old numbers here.
Well, no, they're recent numbers, and I put it in the band 2.1. I think those are just under 1.9, just to obviously, in case it does come over a little.
Yep.
But
And that's another kind of related to both Steve and John's, we're and pencils upside this way, like if this ban were to pass, we'd want to get those numbers finalized, what it's going to be, put them out to bid. There's also, with Lanes being here, like, most folks, I believe, kind of, that's where they get their pavement through. So they have the, best quality mixes. Maine DOT uses them a lot. There might be a reason to single source through them. We put it out to bid in general, but to have maybe a 2-3 year piece with them to have, and to be first on their list for those spring pavings, when obviously the ground is ready to be paved, so that we're, using a local company, but at a good price, and they have predictable business, and we in the city of Ellsworth have kind of first dibs on the mix and those project crews, and we know they're there, and it's not getting to late summer and we're begging them to do a road, in between big Maine DOT projects, which usually start I believe towards later May, June. So we can kind of be the first on the list here to get our roads repaved.
Just one other thought. I wonder if there are some other much smaller, like sort of low-hanging fruits we could fold into this from things that we've heard from discussions with downtown business owners and recurring things like signage and sidewalks and like the bathrooms downtown, that some of those are expensive, but maybe signage isn't so much, and so, everybody loves roads, but to be able to finance things so they're just easy to purchase and install, and suddenly we've got like a few good-looking signs, and that is a feel-good thing.
Yeah.
Whereas the roads will take a while, and does that make sense?
It does, and I think in the infrastructure piece, signage is in there. I think when we had the parking kiosk conversation, we had, I think it was 20,000 for was what you'd want as a full sign replacement for those smaller things. That's not inclusive of all the signage, but it's been a big, as we heard from the business owners and others, it's just their signs are old, they're not accurate in some cases, or and it's a pain point. Bathrooms too. Got some interesting ideas on that I'll share a little later on as well. The bathrooms are expensive if you want to build kind of public restrooms around here, really expensive. So there might be some options around that. And porta-johns are much cheaper, but not exactly, the right look for a modern city to have everywhere. So, but also a big need and a big pressure point for the business owners, who folks are constantly coming into their businesses to use the facilities. So, it's all the interesting things about pressures of new growth and tourists and these other things. Yeah, bathrooms probably, and I can imagine the business owners are they're seeing just so much more bathroom. People are driving through here, they stop, and this is like a bathroom break place for them.
This is great. This is helpful. Thank you.
Awesome.
I feel informed.
Good. Me too. And more to come. It's the total infrastructure list is going to be big, but at least we'll have the data we need to start making some longer term decisions.
I could just very quick. We started conversations with Healthy Acadia a month or more ago. So they ran the warming shelter, if you recall, last winter. And let's just get a couple numbers up. Something like just over 100 individuals were served at that shelter, and over 1,000 bed nights is how they calculated. Most of them Ellsworth people, and some of them from greater areas in the county, and some from Bangor, but the vast majority Ellsworth people. They also had a relatively new position called navigator, which this is like a professional trained person that knows all the different stakeholders and players in the area and what they can do, and so they can kind of step in and advocate for people who don't necessarily fit in easily. So say somebody comes in to see Tina and GA, and this is a person that needs some mental health services, like maybe medical services, we're not sure, nobody really knows. A navigator comes in and sort of walks this person through the necessary places, and eventually is responsible for placing them either in shelter or getting them, applying for jobs and things like that, that is not really under the scope of any individual other organization. So those are two things that Healthy Acadia came to us last month to say that certain state and federal grants had dried up to the point where they don't have enough funding for staffing to operate the warming center through the weekend days through this season. They also don't have enough funding to pay one of their full-time navigator people. So as a background, Tina and the GA department and the city have been at these meetings, and Tina's all for this, and they've been communicating the whole time, sort of advocating for trying to find a way to fund these things. So the numbers that they're looking for are just over $37,000 this season would pay for full 24/7 warming center, so that fills in those daytime weekend hours. And then something around 87,000 was a navigator position. They're not, they can be exclusive. It's not obligatory that they get both, so they think the warming center funding is a little bit more important, and they could fund one without needing to fund the other. So that was a question they had for us, and a question I had for the finance committee was, is there a way to fund some of that? We don't need to, I'm like mostly focusing on the mechanics right now, because if we thought there was a way to fund it, we could have the discussion in council. I personally think that the city will in some way have to pay for this, whether it's directly or through different, the hospital, the police department, GA, having to manage the deficit of this service. I had a couple meetings or emails with the commission to see if there's any Hancock funds that could cover this. There was like $2.2 million left of their ARPA, but apparently they've earmarked that for the new emergency
Operations Center
that they're going to be building out in Hancock. So apparently there's no funding there, although there might be some county grants that could be put toward these, but I don't have any more information than just there might be grants in January or February. So that's the background. We were maybe going to look into seeing if there were any ARPA funds remaining in the city budget, or if there are any other creative ideas for where funds could come from. I think it's important to try to find that $37,000.
When did they open? Was it January of 2023? It's only been a couple of years, correct?
It's only been a couple of years. I think that's right.
Do you know if they've gone to other municipalities? I know, and I'm just asking, how do they know that those people are from Ellsworth? Is that what they're saying, or?
That is what they're saying. They also track the data. What they use is kind of the standard homeless, unhoused data, which is you ask the people where they stayed the previous night, and that is.
So not where they came from?
It's not perfect, but
Mhm.
it's the standard, and it's the best that they can do.
Yeah.
So and I haven't seen their data on this, but how they describe it is that people do come in, but not from very far afield. It's not as though people are coming up from Portland or from, top of Aroostook County. They're kind of circulating within this area, and Tina agreed with that sentiment, that they're maybe coming from Bangor and maybe circulating, but that they're not coming in from afar. But again, that's data where they're asking people, where did you stay last night? And that's the best that they got.
Michelle?
Hey, John,
Yep.
It's, my only thing about this is, if you look and see, like, the GA increases,
Yeah.
you know, over the last couple of years for housing, I mean, it's just, I don't know, it's like quadrupled. And, I mean, so we're already paying as a service center for all of these people that are coming in, and I don't want to see anybody be cold either by any means, but, I really think that there needs to be some kind of statement that the county really needs to start helping with this. Because this is not an Ellsworth problem, this is an area, a regional problem, and I just don't think we should foot the bill. I don't mind participating in something like this, I really don't, but I don't think that it should be up to us to always be the one that pays for, you know, shortfalls because we happen to be the service center that everybody comes to because this is where the services are. You know, so I'm a bit torn. I mean, I'd like to have a conversation with Billy Clark or something that they need to step up and start helping with these types of things because it is their county
Yeah, I agree.
and it's state.
And is this supposed to cover Washington County as well? So it's
Uh,
Hancock, Washington County?
They do serve people from Washington County. The vast majority on
Right,
this
from
list are
Hancock,
Ellsworth, but yeah, there are.
I just wonder if we should reach out to the Washington County office as well and be like, people are coming here, I think that you need to probably help as well, or other municipalities.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I mean, if the county's not willing to step in, going directly to the other towns that are on that list and saying, here's your percentage that we've marked. I'm planning on going to the commissioners' meeting on the morning of the 19th.
Okay.
Just saying this all again to whoever's there, but
Thanks for doing
Yeah.
that.
it's interesting to have some discussions with the county. I mean, we should be working together on this. It is, Michelle, I
Agreed.
totally agree. It's a county and a regional issue.
Yeah, I know, now that the election's over and Tina's very interested in kind of maybe putting a little bit of staff bandwidth to help out further on this, because Tina and heading up GA and Caitlin as well is helping, like they're gonna be dealing with this. I think in some ways we talked, John, like the warming shelter is the one piece keeping but the navigator is like somebody that Tina's has been relying on for, once this happens, falls to us, Tina's gonna do a ton of work to find shelter, to find unavailable services, a bunch of range of issues. And she's oftentimes working very hand in hand with Healthy and Katie on these pieces, so it's, yeah, it's.
Where did these people go before this warming center started?
Well,
2 years ago?
We asked, well, the question I asked Paige, one of the directors of Healthy Katie, was, like, what happens if and when we don't fund this? Where do those people go? She said they will go to Hannaford and, like, sit in the lobby for a bit, and then maybe go to Walmart, sit in the lobby for a bit, and then maybe end up in the ER if they start to have issues, maybe get picked up by the police. They kind of will, like, do that circulation.
So that must have been happening before Healthy Acadia started here at this warming shelter?
I believe so, and I also think the numbers that we've seen the last couple of years have been like doubling and tripling, quadrupling in terms of number of people in this area experiencing it.
That's a low barrier shelter, so unlike the Emmaus Center has a
That's right.
high barrier you
Yeah,
have to pass.
which
certain-
is why they're so expensive, is because they need staffing in there all the time, because it's low barrier, so you need qualified people there to make sure things are all right.
You know, I think, it's one of the things I was thinking of, to your point, is this opens, that's what's created this homelessness, but I think it's actually just, that the homeless, those things went hand in hand, that there's a big surge here that actually is filling the gap and is taking a bit of the heat of, like, it added a bunch of homelessness here when actually there was an increase for, this is a national surge, right, of homelessness, opioid addiction prices, housing price increases where people are losing their homes. A lot of these folks have been surprised. There is a good level of chronic homelessness, but a lot of times it is temporary. People have lost their home, the ability to pay in a very limited amount of time. I know there's a task force on.
December 23rd, 2022 is when they opened, from your previous
Okay,
question.
yep, so it was FY '23.
John, did they have enough to operate for a few months? I mean, to give us time to talk with the other counties, and I would be more than willing to help you with that.
Sort of. It's a tricky situation. They wanted an answer sooner than later because there's potentially enough to operate, but because of the staffing, they'll need to make decisions and bring people in and train them fairly soon. And so that's kind of the cutoff, is they could get by, but then they wouldn't have those staff trained up for later weekend days. I mean, maybe they can figure it out or not, but that was their timeline, is they would have to start training in like a couple of weeks. So they'd want, if not assurances, maybe a likelihood or not.
I asked this question before, but I'll ask it again, is there not an opportunity for volunteers to sign up for 12-hour shift, or?
Not in this capacity. Certainly not for the navigator, because it's such a highly trained thing. And I think the same is true. I mean, potentially people could sign up as volunteers, but they need to go through the training process, and I don't know how long that takes. But they're professionals. They've got some idea of mental health. And, that's the people they're using. Yeah. They were able to get some thousands of dollars for supplies for the warming center this year, so that's through private funding and donations, but it's not quite enough to cover the additional staffing costs.
No, we're getting close
There's
to.
no win in this situation.
No, there really isn't.
And we're gonna prep the ARPA remaining funds for December discussion. I think in general, we were thinking there might be about 10,000 left over, but there might be a little more due to some of the projects coming under budget that were out there. But those, I need to prepare multiple options, so of what that could be. We want to obviously have 0 ARPA left by the end of the year, so there's nothing to return to the feds. So whether it's to this type of thing or to other roads or infrastructure or projects that are also in line with ARPA funding, I need to have, we'll have multiple options for you. There's some reallocation to the lead remediation came in under budget because a few areas where we thought there was going to be more lead that actually ended up not being there, but at the same time that we could redo some of those bedrooms down there that are in pretty tough shape to use some of that funding or in the downstairs where it was supposed to be. So I'll have kind of multiple options coming in December on how to make sure we clear the decks on our surplus ARPA funding. It's not a ton of money, but we want to make sure every last penny is accounted for and drawn down.
Okay.
Good job.
Thanks for listening.
Absolutely.
Thanks for all the work.
Anybody from the public have comment?
We're laying down the law with the county.
As a
I'm happy
taxpaying
to-
citizen from Belleville, I think your road plan is a good one.
Yay!
We'll try not to mess with your
Thank you.